Hi everyone, my name is Ms. Carla and I'm one of the Children's House teachers here at MRA as well as the elementary music teacher. And I'm here to give you a little glimpse into the Montessori Children's House math materials. One of my favorite things about the math materials is how concrete they are and how they make sense. We start by teaching the child right from the very beginning that every object that we count has a number. So we start first with number rods, and we get the rod into their hand and we have the children count with us. 1. And they can feel that this is 1. And then we keep moving up from there, working on the 0 through 9 numeration. 1, 2, and have them build from there, counting all the way up to 9. We practice a lot of different lessons on how to count from 0 to 9 and what those numbers mean and how to count them out loud, how to count them with objects, how to recognize the numeration. And one of the ways we do that is by having the child do the sandpaper numbers, just like our sandpaper letters that we have in our language area. Using 2 fingers, the child's going to trace this number that's made out of sandpaper. They get a tactile representation of this number, 1, while they're learning the fine motor skills that they're going to need to use for pencil and paper later on, and also learning how to recognize and associate the numbers. So on the shelf behind me, you see a lot of materials that are all designed to help us with that 0 through 9 numeration. And when the children start getting a pretty good handle on the counting, we introduce them to one of the most basic of the Montessori materials called the short bead stair. And the short bead stair is made up of small individual bead units that are put together to match our numeration. So we have 1, 2, we have 1, 2, 3. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, and they count all the way up to the number 9. And then when they get to that final number, they realize that there's a number that comes next. And we introduce them to the beautiful golden beads, number 10. And that is a big moment for the children because they've heard about the special golden beads, they've seen them in the classroom, but this is their first opportunity to work with them, and they get very, very excited. Once we get past this 0 through 9 numeration, we move on to learning then about units, and then tens, and then 100s, and finally 1,000 beads. And we do this in varying ways. This is an introductory lesson about the golden bead material. Maria Montessori figured out while working with children that if they could count 0 to 9, that they would easily be able to count 10 through 90, and 100 through 900, and 1,000 to 9,000 in the same fashion. And therefore, we're able to start working with very large numbers at an early age. In this same section of the classroom then, the children are also introduced to the teens and learning to count past 10 by 1 units, and also then eventually working up to the 100 board. And that's always a highlight for a math student when they finally get to that big lesson where they're going to be able to count and numerate from 1 all the way to 100. We've moved over by the bead cabinet. This cabinet will be one that you will find in every Montessori classroom, and it's very visually appealing to the students and generates a lot of excitement about math. The colors and the beads are just such an appealing material for the children to get their hands on. We've already introduced them to the short bead stair, working on that 1 through 10 numeration. And now from there, we move on to squaring numbers and even to cubing numbers as the children get ready for that. And so you see I've laid out here the short bead chain, and I have also laid out the long bead chain for the number 4. And what the children would do in these lessons is they will learn how to count all of the sets of fours and eventually learn that they could combine them all and make that into a square. And then once they have learned about squaring numbers, then we move on to cubing numbers, and they quickly learn that if they combine all of the squares together, it will make into the cube. Very complicated math that's made very simple for the children because the materials are so hands-on, so concrete, and so appealing. So in this area of the classroom, we continue our use of the short bead stair by now combining two short bead stairs together, and then they start learning how to add those beads and those units together. And this is some of the beginning lessons that we have in doing addition. We also introduce the children to subtraction, and we use a lot of different types of materials to work on subtraction with objects, or subtraction using our InstaLearn board, or using some of the Montessori subtraction boards, so that they're learning the concept of how to take away objects as well as to add them. And when the children have started to master some of the addition and subtraction, then we introduce them to the beginning concepts of multiplication. And again, we go back to that bead stair again. This time we give them a bead box full of lots of beads, and they set up the multiplication equations using all of the individual beads so that they can count them out and learn how to do beginning multiplication. And another great tool we have for learning multiplication is the multiplication board. This board allows them to set up using individual units to be able to numerate out their multiplication equations. And once the children have understood the concept of multiplication, we do the same thing, this time using a division board to divide out our numbers. These materials on this shelf will last the child for a long time in the Montessori classroom. A lot of the children will successfully master how to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division using small numbers at this time. And then we work on to larger numbers using the golden bead materials that we have as well, and we teach children about how to carry numbers and how to exchange things once we get past the number 9. So in this section of the classroom of the math area, we introduce the children first to fractions using our fraction skittles. You can see they're a very concrete and clear example of how things are cut into fractions or smaller chunks. And the children learn first about dividing things using the skittles, and then we introduce them to the fraction insets, and this sort of mimics the metal inset work we've done in the language area in concept, but now we're dividing things into fractions and having the children figure out what types of fractions can associate with each other, working on combining them to make bigger numbers, doing addition with fractions, and cutting things into different shaped sizes. We have lots of fraction work that is very hands-on and easy and clear for the children to see, and some additional materials as well. The pizza game is one of our favorites in this room, where we work on parts of the pizza as a fraction, and that's really a clear example to children how to figure out what a fraction means, because they understand what a pizza is and how we could cut that into a certain number of pieces. In this area, we also introduce the children to time telling. We don't anticipate that the child will master time telling in probably until maybe 2nd or 3rd grade, but we introduce them to the concept of an analog clock at this point. We learn starting with numeration on the clock of 0 to 12 o'clock, and then working on how to do first the hours and then the half hours, and then eventually working into the quarter hours. And the children really enjoy trying to figure out what time it is when we're doing varying things throughout the day and checking the analog clock.